Long-haul truckers, what's the creepiest/most paranormal thing you've seen on the road at night? I was coming back home from a trip from Michigan and I saw these people wearing cult-like robes. One in town, one on a highway, and one in a park, all staring at me. Did you approach the dog park? You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to acknowledge it either. The council would like to see you for re-education purposes. I seem to remember one of our interns sneaking in. She had no end of trouble, what with all the dimensional temporal travel etc. I'm a truck driver in the UK. Was driving through rural Scotland one night going down a country lane, all of a sudden I start to see flashing lights come through the trees. Lights of all colors flashing through the trees and causing some really freaky looking shadows on the road. I'm not a believer of aliens or anything, but my first thought was UFOs. Safe to say I put my foot down and got out of there. Found out the next day it was rave happening in a field. But at the time it didn't half scare me. Myself and two friends had to drive from Laredo, TX to Baton Rouge, La one night in my Ford van. It was about 2 a.m. There is a particularly long and dark section of highway just outside Laredo, no buildings, towns or lights for about 50 miles. I was in the right lane coming up on a truck and pulled out into the left passing lane. As I was slowly overtaking this long truck, my peripheral vision caught a sudden movement of this big truck towards the right shoulder. I saw the truck was swerving to avoid hitting a person dressed in all white face, whose arms were folded across the chest and eyes were closed as they walked across the highway. I swerved to the left and barely missed this ghostly looking person with my passenger mirror, can still remember seeing that the eyes were closed, that's how close we came to hitting this person. Laredo TX, you could have stopped right there and I would have agreed on the creepy part. No need for further explanation once Laredo is mentioned. Why is that? I have worked on Laredo a few times there and the whole town has an uneasy feel to it. Everything seems calm but you know a lot of shady things are happening. Well, the reason why it feels creepy, at least in my experience, is that a person would have been driving on Interstate 35 for quite a while, the constant noise of the highway ringing in your ears. And when you are getting closer to the border the highway signs get creepier. Until it says freeway ends at the light and sure enough Interstate 35 ends at an intersection and you just come to a stop at a red light. Nothing else quite feels like it. Because you've been driving for hours it feels dead quiet, especially at night. One time I saw a turn signal on a BMW. I was listening to a radio station when this trucker called in. He said he saw a lot lizard get out of one truck, douche with a bottle of grape soda, and get into the next truck. Edit, clarification, a lot lizard is a prostitute that works in a truck stop or rest stop. I'm only an amateur gynecologist, but that seems like a sure way to get a yeast infection. And diabetes. And AIDS. And ants. Do you want ants? This is how you get ants. I was 23, my newly married husband and I decided driving team would be a fun adventure after college, rather than jumping into the 9 to 5. I was down in Arizona, on a long stretch of nothing about 4 a.m. when a guy pulled up next to me waving his CB. I never left mine on, listening to those guys BS was irritating. I turned on my CB and he told me I had a blown tire. I thanked him, figuring I would stop at the next truck stop. He kept harassing me to pull over and check my tire for a good 40 miles. I finally got to a next town and pilot truck stop, got out and checked my truck. No blown tires anywhere. No clue what the guy would done to me, but so glad I trusted my gut and didn't stop. Not paranormal, but I have plenty of stories as a young woman on the road. By reading all these comment threads I've come to realize how much I need to learn from life. Somebody says something like that to me, I'm stopping instantly. It's a little different in one of those trucks, you've got 18 wheels, you can go with one flat, or blown missing, tire for a while. Now? In your car? You'd notice something was wrong right away. But always trust your gut, and don't stop until a well-lit, populated area. I drove by a marsh every night when I was going home from work. One night I saw a car pulled over with hazards on. Dude was head to toe covered in blood. No crash, no injury, just covered in blood. Maybe he just had one hell of a bloody nose. My stepdad is a truck driver and I asked him this question and he gave me 3 answers. In Winston-Salem, NC, a guy was masturbating while driving by his truck and my stepdad threw his water bottle at him. Another time he said he was up near Oregon and he was the only one on the freeway at the time since it was around 2 a.m. and something large and pale swooped down a few yards in front of his truck and swooped back up into the tree line. While driving at 70 miles per hour, a tire rolled ahead of him and went across the median, nearly hitting another car. I want to know more about the pale swoopy thing. Edit. If I get one more reply saying owl, I'm gonna duck and lose it. Edit. Lost it. Okay, I've been forced to turn off notifications. There was an owl on top of my car. My mother in Florida is asking why she's receiving texts of pictures of owls. I can see defeat. I hope you owl all happy with all y'all lives now. Legends of the swoopy pale are few and far between. It is thought that its swoopy paleness is enough to kill most who see it, but the few who live to tell the tale all say the same thing. It's is pale and it swoops. Edit. My autocorrect now automatically capitalizes swoopy. The spoopy swoopy. The spoopy swoopy is actually a slightly different type of swoopy native to northern Ontario. The swoopy pale is a close relative, however. The two can in fact interbreed, however, to create one of two types of offspring, the horrifying spoopy pale or the useless swoopy swoopy. Saw a clown staggering down an alley in the city, back facing us, while we were coming to a stoplight at like 1 a.m. Looked like he was still blowing balloons, or masturbating. Not seeing his face made it more ominous. I'm not sure if it's either really creepy or sad. Maybe he was on his way to abduct children, or maybe he was blind drunk after a long day. Wow, balloons is a lucky guy. I was driving in upstate New York in early spring during deer season, and not only were there deer everywhere you had to look out for, there was deer pieces strewn everywhere from cars hitting them, then more cars hitting the roadkill and so on. Literal deer chunks all over the roads. Gross. Upstate New Yorker here. Yeah, it gets pretty bad sometimes. Possums and trash pandas should also be watched for. One time a skunk was hit right outside my house and it stank for a week. Same. You get used to the deer. Weirdest thing I ever saw in the road was this big black dog sniffing around in the middle of the road. I was on a straight patch of road surrounded by woods and the thing was a ways off, so I slowed down ahead of time and just kinda crept up on it while waiting for it to get out of the way. The closer I get, the bigger it's getting. Like, too big for a dog. And chubby. Suddenly it stands up on its hind legs and I almost freak out until I realize it's a damn bear. Luckily it was the middle of the day, otherwise I'd have lost it watching it stand. I slowly creep around it while keeping my eyes on it. I'm not too worried because it's a black bear, but still, when I suddenly hear a loud crack of a branch and I turn to see the much bigger mama bear about 10 feet from my open driver's side window. Longest few seconds of my life driving away from them. I almost freak out until I realize it's a damn bear. That is the single best line I've read and reminds me of a couple months ago when we couldn't go out for gym and one of the elementary schools had a lock-in because there was a bear. My dad has several stories from hauling logs in Idaho and driving trucks through Utah and Nevada. My favorite is from actually just in his pickup going through Utah. He said there was a light keeping pace with him out in the desert on a moonless night. It kept pace for a minute before it disappeared and his truck turned off. He stopped and turned it on and pulled off at the next diner. The folks in the diner called it a common occurrence. The creepiest is when he was hauling logs in Idaho and was coming down from near Coeur d'Alene area during a snowy winter night. He was putting on chains before heading down steep grade and said all of the hair stood up on his body. It felt like there was something watching him. Halfway down the switchbacks he saw a large figure standing on a 20-foot tall embankment. As he got closer it jumped down and the shoulders were as tall as the cab. In a single bound it leapt down and then leapt over to the other side of the embankment. At the time he thought it was a Sasquatch, now he says it was probably a demon trying to make him crash. He didn't stop to remove the chains until he was well away from the mountain. A few years ago some animal rights activists managed to release thousands of mink from a farm next to a large road, at night. The road was more blood than tarmac for miles. Remains everywhere and don't even get me started on the smell. Edit, spelling. One time on a long distance drive I started seeing white spots about a foot in diameter on the road. Probably 30 to 40 over the span of a mile or so, and I couldn't quite figure out what they were. Eventually I came to a pickup truck with a large cage built onto the back pulled over on the side road. The door to the cage was wide open and it was completely empty. The man driving it was staring at the empty cage and scratching his head. The white spots were apparently loose chickens.